Lots of controversy this past week in the news with two women who made objectionable comments, and the controversy swirls around the response to the two comments with Rosanne Barr and Samantha Bee. Conservatives are saying it's a double standard. The media and the entertainment industry is responding very differently to Rosanne Barr, who's a Trump supporter. She makes her offensive remarks and she gets fired and loses her show, and Samantha Bee makes hers and nothing negative happens to her at all. And the other side argues back and says, no, it's not a double standard. It's different consequences because what Rosanne Barr did was far worse than what Samantha Bee did. What Rosanne said was racist, and what Samantha Bee did was only obscene. And so those are two completely different scales of evil. Now that sentiment, I believe that most Americans would probably agree with that. I think most people would say, yeah, racism, that's, in our culture right now, there's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than making a racist comment, especially towards a black person. And to say a black person was descended from some apes, that's such a degrading and a dehumanizing thing to say, that it's rightly viewed as evil. But the question of whether obscenity is evil is something that it's real important for us to think through as Christians. And if it is, why is it evil? Is it really true that racism is orders of magnitude worse than obscenity? What the world would argue is racism is worse because racism hurts people. Obscenity doesn't hurt anybody. I mean, in this case, it kind of did because it was an insult and it might have hurt Ivanka Trump's feelings, but really, who gets harmed by obscenity? Racism, though, destroys lives and tears at the culture's fabric and all the rest of the stuff. And that's the argument. First of all, here's what I would say. First, obscenity does hurt people. In fact, that's the whole point of it. The purpose of obscenity is to hurt. It's to convey damage. What obscenity is it's verbal violence. We have words in this culture. You can say things in this culture that have obscene terms, or you can say those same things with other terms that aren't obscene, and it's perfectly acceptable. You can speak that way with children and mixed company and all that. Where obscene language comes from is violence. If you go to a prison where there's murderers and rapists and criminals who are violent, and you listen to the way they speak, they'll use those terms. Why? Because our culture has decided, okay, these are the terms that mean that mean what those criminals want to do physically with their body, rape and kill and all that, they do verbally with those terms. And so that's what those words mean. That's the purpose of those words. That's why Samantha Bee used them. You can tell she's angry, and when you're expressing anger and you want to hurt somebody, you use obscene language. And that becomes really clear when you just think about the next thing that Samantha Bee said. After she used this very vulgar and crude term to refer to Ivanka Trump, and that's the one that everybody's all upset about because it's an obscenity. But then the very next thing she said was equally evil and degrading, I believe. She made a comment about that implied an incestuous relationship between Donald Trump and his daughter. A horrible, horrible thing to say. But nobody's upset about that. You don't hear anything about that. Why? Because she just used regular language in saying it instead of obscene language. So yes, obscene language is different. I think it does hurt. It does cause harm. Back to the question of what makes something evil. Suppose obscenity didn't hurt anybody. Then could we say it's not as bad as racism because racism hurts people? That standard, when we say that something is evil or not evil based on who it hurts or whether it hurts people, elevates people in importance above God. Who's more important, God or people? Our society would say, well, people. They might not come right out and say that, but that's the way you can tell by their value system, by how they rate evil, different stages of evil, that's what they believe. Because the most evil thing, hurting people. Number two, hurting animals. That's kind of evil, not as evil as hurting people, because animals aren't as important as people, but it's kind of... And then last on the list, doing something that doesn't hurt anybody, all it does is dishonor God. Pfft, who cares about that? That's if it doesn't hurt anybody, doesn't hurt any animals, doesn't do it, only thing it does is dishonor God, it's not that big a deal. And that's what people think about obscenity. That's why in our culture, people don't see obscenity as that big a deal. Even in the Christian world, even pastors use it from the pulpit very often. They just don't see it hurting anybody, therefore it's not evil. And that reflects a value system where people are most important, God is least important. So was the thing that Samantha Bee said, that obscenity, was that especially evil? Yeah, it was wicked, it was vile, and it was hurtful, and she should have some consequence. But what about Rosanne Barr, what she said? Was that really that evil? Was it really that dehumanizing? For Rosanne Barr to say that a black woman looked like she was descended from apes? Yes, yes. That's a horrible, as I said before, it's a wicked thing to say. It's racist and it's bad. It's dehumanizing. And it doesn't surprise me one bit that our culture sees that as dehumanizing and evil. It doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me, and what baffles me, and I cannot understand, is why there's not the exact same outrage when evolutionists do the exact same thing every day about all people. They say all of us are descended from some monkey-like creature 20 million years ago. Why is it okay for evolutionists to say that about us, but it's not okay what Rosanne Barr said? Only because what Rosanne Barr did was expose the evil of it by reducing it down to one generation. The evolutionists, they take ridiculous, offensive ideas and stretch them out over millions and millions of years, and we can't comprehend millions of years, and so we just think somehow in all that time, somehow or another, the absurdity of it disappears, or the offensiveness of it disappears. But it doesn't disappear. There's no difference. All Rosanne did was take the folly of evolutionary theory and reduce it down to one generation so you could see how evil it is. I'm not saying she did that on purpose, but that's the effect of what she did. I think what she did was, what she said was evil, but I also think what evolutionists say is evil and harmful and dehumanizing. And if you question whether it's dehumanizing, just look at Hitler. Look at the effect it's had on culture since it's been popularized. It was Hitler's whole philosophy behind what he was doing. The reason he thought it was okay to wipe out whole ethnic groups was because they were less evolved. And the whole point of evolution is survival of the fittest. What's the standard of what makes something good or bad if you're an evolutionist? Well, it's just survival of the process of the survival of the fittest. That which is strong survives, the weak dies out, and then what you've got is an advance in evolutionary process. And so that's all Hitler was doing. He's just wiping out the weak, which is what the strong are supposed to do in evolutionary theory. And so it's dehumanizing to the entire human race. So Samantha Bee, what she did, obscenity, evil, harmful, wicked. Racism, evil, harmful, wicked. Evolutionism, evil, harmful, wicked.